tubers and connoisseurs of fine Soviet and Imperial Russian military. We're here at the 2024 OMSA convention in Chicago, Illinois. And we're here today with Igor, who has set up. Yeah. So Igor, how many times have you set up at the OMSA?
Oh, I lost count. I would say for the last 20 or more years, 30 years almost.
That many, right? Just consistently.
Yeah, consistently. Every convention. It's, as I said, always. It's definitely worth coming to.
Okay.
You don't know what you're going to find, and most importantly, you're going to be talking face to face with experts in the fields of medals. Some of them come here from all across the world. I just had a great conversation with a couple that came from Australia.
Oh, yes.
There are people coming from Europe, European dealers and European collectors. There are people coming from South America with great amount of expertise, and that's what you're here for. It's not necessarily to find stuff, although there's a fair amount of that too.
Right. And we see it's a grand convention hall. The reason why it's so sparse right now is that a lot of people have gone to the
seminars.
lecture. The seminar lecture right now.
Yeah.
All right.
But it's not the typical show, so you don't expect a huge influx of people. You don't expect lines.
No, it's not your typical military show.
No, it's open for members only, so you have to be a member of OMSA. If you want to attend one of this, I absolutely implore you to join OMSA. It's very inexpensive. It's we're talking peanuts, $25. You get magazine subscription for it. You get access to OMSA database.
A lot of scholarship.
And you have an opportunity to go to a convention.
That's right.
Which is a great social event for a very special group of people who share the same interests. And people come from all strata of society.
That's right.
It's not your mega educated necessarily or professorial, or you find everybody here. Former military, you find cops, you find people active duty, people who work for the government, people who work in private industry.
That is true.
All kinds of people with different backgrounds, and it's great to meet and talk. It's very enriching experience in every sense of the word. Yeah,
well, very true. As I was walking around, I spoke to our Korean War vet there, who has spent 20 years in China, undercover, basically.
Oh, you're talking about Warren.
Oh, yes, Warren, right?
He's a celebrity.
He's a celebrity, I worked with Paul McDaniels, right?
They co-authored the book, which is the Bible of North Korean medal collecting.
That's right.
If you ever think of starting collecting North Korean medals and orders, then you can't go about without that book.
Oh, absolutely.
Comprehensive guide to North Korean orders and medals. And this is the kind of the type of people you meet. And
high caliber.
If you don't know, Warren is a Bronze Star winner.
That's right. Silver Star too.
Silver Star.
Yeah, Silver Star.
And he fought in Korea. And it's incredible what he did.
Yes.
To get that medal.
That's right.
He basically attacked an enemy position single-handedly.
Yes.
At the end, captured the hill and then defended it for hours, just being alone. And he never boasts of it, but
very humble man.
Yeah, very humble.
Very humble man.
But also a great expert in many things concerning medal collecting.
Absolutely,
Definitely
a lot of scholars here, basically.
Yeah. And you will meet them. You will acquire depth of knowledge that you won't find anyplace else.
Yes, and also explain about the hotel accommodations, the convenience of everything.
Oh yeah, it's always on the premises, meaning you don't have to drive anywhere. Of course, you don't have to walk far. You just take your elevator basically down to the convention hall.
Yes.
And that's where your medal paradise is.
That's right, yeah. And for myself, I flew in from New York City. The airfare was like $160. There was a hotel shuttle from the airport directly to the hotel, which is also the convention hall.
Yeah, that's always a condition that wherever a convention is held, and it's always in a different place.
Yes.
It's, next year, it's probably going to be in Florida.
Yes.
I don't think they've decided yet, but it's looking that way, probably in Pensacola.
That's right.
It's nice that it rotates around the United States.
Absolutely, yeah. And they pay attention to these details because normally if we come to Chicago and we have to walk on the street and get waylaid and get mugged,
Right. No,
it won't be
not
such a fun
happen.
experience.
No, it's not going to happen because you are staying in the same place and it's always a safe area.
And we have security.
Right. There's 24-hour security.
Yeah, a lot of interesting people here.
Yeah, but socially meet with the people, and there's a banquet at the end on Saturday.
Oh yes, the
So
banquet.
there will be a lecture on a specific medal field by an expert again.
That's right.
And it's not going to be a scholarly kind of like research sort of thing. It will be fun.
That's right.
It will be a story, oftentimes, or two or five,
Yes, yes, yes.
about evolving around medal collecting, but
Yes.
have in other words, if you have your spouse with you, you won't bore her to death, bringing her to that.
That's right.
to
In
the
fact,
banquet.
today we were graced by this couple, right? They're
Stopped
both,
by,
yeah. They're
both share the
both
same hobby. Yeah.
share the same hobby and interest in metal collecting.
Yep.
Yep, yep. And of course, we have our old school dealers. We have Steve Ackley of Ackley Unlimited. He's been in business for
He's a
30
legend,
years.
yeah.
No legend. No legend right here. Next door, retired attorney, Lieutenant Colonel.
Yeah,
Anyway.
yeah. General Bergdorf, for General, just stopped by
That's right.
this morning.
Yes, yes. And we have
some
Floyd, right?
Yeah,
Major
Jeff Floyd. He used to be OMSA president.
Yeah,
He's,
yeah. That's right.
He's a world expert in Asian medals and
Yeah.
Chinese medals in particular.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then we have the auction houses, of course.
Of course,
Right.
yeah, like European ones, and just you have no excuse if you're collecting medals.
Absolutely.
You must come to at least one of these take it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
try-
Yep.
try it
It's,
out.
it's the expense that you should not spare.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Just spend the money.
Once a year, you
Yep.
gotta do it.
Absolutely.
But in any case, let's get to
Yeah.
what we have at hand.
Let's get to the nitty gritty here.
Yeah, some of the Russian stuff and Soviet
Okay.
stuff.
Fantastic. All right then. All right, Igor. So what do we have today?
This I want to show first because this is the most unusual thing, and it came from such an odd source, and it's something that you're probably never going to see again. I've never seen it before, and it has to do with an American award. And I found it in a group of American documents.
I give you 2 catalogs for
The reason I was even looking at it because it's not really my area, because there were some other things in the same collection that had to do with Soviet Union or Russia, but there were some papers that were American, mostly various things, not even necessarily military, but there were some American military documents from World War II, and this is a transcript of what would become a citation for the Legion of Merit, for the American award to a Soviet general.
Oh, wow.
But what's most uncanny about it is that it's written by a Russian. You can tell that it's in Russian, but a Russian who doesn't have much experience writing. The writing is almost childish in how the letters are copied carefully. It's not a real cursive.
Okay.
But on the other hand, whoever wrote it did have a very good knowledge of Russian language. So it's a Russian speaker who was brought up, for sure, speaking Russian freely, so of Russian descent, most certainly. Somebody who could read Russian fluently, easily, but didn't have very much experience writing. So he had the basics, but to write actually was an unusual thing. So he had to carefully kind of draw every letter by memory. It came out just perfectly fine, but just the style of it tells me that this is somebody who was brought up probably in the United States, but in a Russian environment, in a Russian family, maybe family of old Russian immigrants. And let's see what it says.
Okay.
It says, headquarters of 9th Army of North American United States, chancellery or office of the commander, field post office number such and such, and was written on 27th of May 1945. So again, it was an American typed document in English language that needed to be translated into Russian, and using pretty much the style that would be familiar to the Russians, to the Soviets specifically. So it has this flowery kind of prose somewhat, and maybe it's overdoing it with compliments in some ways, heroic and glorious and all that stuff that you typically find in Soviet documents of the period, but it's done by an American. So essentially, English document translated to Russian by somebody who has perfect knowledge of Russian, but not much experience writing. And that's fascinating.
Incredible.
So it says to award Legion of Merit on the level of commander by the decree of the President of the United States and according to the authority specialized in military code, to Colonel General would be a more familiar term, of the Guards, hero of the Soviet Union, Alexander Gorbatov. Now, Gorbatov is one of the very famous and very capable Soviet generals of World War II. And it explains why he is to be given this award. It says that he performed valiantly and in most extraordinary manner as a commander of the third. It says Third Red Army. It's technically incorrect. Nobody called that army Third Red Army. It was just the Third Army. But from American point of view, it's a Third Red Army. And again, the way that these words are put together makes me certain that whoever wrote this was from a family of old Russian immigrants, probably immigrants who escaped Russian Revolution or after the Russian Civil War and settled somewhere in the United States. And we know a number of examples of people like that. There was a whole community, for example, and still exists to some extent in San Francisco. It's not by accident that one of the areas in San Francisco, one of the better areas actually, is called Russian Hill, because there were many Russians who lived there
In San Francisco,
even before the revolution, and especially after the revolution.
I see.
And guess who was the founder of Order and Medal Society of America?
Oh.
Yash Yesenitsky,
Oh.
who was born in Manchuria to a family of Russian officers who escaped at the end of the Russian Civil War, after he fought in it, escaped with the remnants of the troops, of their White Army troops, what they were called, fighting against the Reds, against the Bolsheviks in the Far East and Siberia.
Small world.
So Kolchak troops, many of them ended up in Harbin. Harbin was mostly a Russian city in China. And then this area came under Japanese control. He, by the way, absolutely hated everything Japanese as a result of his experience as a little boy there. To his death, he never forgave Japanese.
For all atrocities.
For the atrocities. And he immigrated to the United States just 1 year before Pearl Harbor. As a matter of fact, the ship that carried him here was later sunk by an American submarine.
Wow.
Later, during the war.
Wow.
So he settled here. He worked for the police department in San Francisco, and he was the founder of Order and Medal Society of America. OMSA number 1 was his number.
Oh, wow. God bless him.
Yeah. So Yash was one of the people that could have written that letter. In fact, I know that he worked on the staff of General Eisenhower during the war and had some very close calls. On some other occasion, we'll talk about him and his experiences in occupied Berlin, his encounters with the Soviets, who would absolutely love to kill him because he was from the white immigration. And they absolutely hated those people. But be it as it may, I'm just saying that this must have been written by one of those people who had working knowledge of Russian, difficulties writing, but not to the extent that they couldn't write. It's written very grammatically correct. There are no errors, as a matter of fact. You could find, but it's written in a very early style. So everything points in the same direction. I wouldn't be surprised, I'm telling you, if Yash actually wrote this some 70 years ago.
Yeah, gotcha.
Think about it. So anyhow, it's Third Red Army. General Gorbatov took part in the heroic Battle of Stalingrad in 1942-43. Then they crossed the Zusha River and broke through the fierce, or the way they put it, monstrous enemy defensive line, captured the city of Oriol, which is, of course, during the Battle of Kursk. Oriol was where the Soviet army counterattacked and pretty much brought Citadel, the German Operation Citadel, to stand still. And under his gallant leadership, the Third Army, again, Third Red Army, crossed many rivers and continued its offensive, and it was destroying enemy in the Minsk area, enemy group of troops in the Minsk area. That's where German Sixth Army, the reconstituted Sixth Army, got encircled, and much of Army Group Center along with it got completely destroyed. The biggest German disaster, actually, of Second World War was in Stalingrad. It was destruction of the Army Group Center in Belarus over the course of Bagration offensive in 1944, June 1944. So it goes on and on. It says that his army broke through the borders of East Prussia and continued to destroy the enemy, encircled enemy group to the southwest of Königsberg. The word Königsberg, by the way, is misspelled Königsberg, which is funny. Again, it's somebody with a full knowledge of Russian who writes very grammatically correct, but just does many things in a very old-fashioned way. Even the endings of the words are somebody who was educated in the style that was there before Russian Civil War. You don't see in 1940s, nobody in Russia would write this way. So it's somebody with the old school education, which is amazing to me. Then in 1945 it says, after a long journey, after a 6-kilometer march, the Third Red Army established contact with the enemy southeast of Berlin, and rapidly moved to the river Elbe, where it met units of the Ninth Army of the United States on 3rd and 4th May, thus ending its glorious path. So, wonderful piece, a commendation. It says Simpson, Lieutenant General, Commander of the Ninth Army of North American United States.
Wow.
Isn't this fantastic document?
Yeah, draft citation, basically.
Yeah, draft
That's what it
citation
is.
for
That's what
Legion
it
of Merit.
is.
And there were a number of these Legion of Merit certificates that came from the Soviet Union, or from the former Soviet Union now. When the Soviet Union collapsed, how they made it out of the archives is anybody's guess. But these were documents that were originally issued in around 1945-46 to many of the Soviet officers, or NCOs even in some cases. And they were kept kind of under wraps. Of course, during the Cold War, they were taken by the authorities. You wouldn't see a Soviet military officer, or any veteran for that matter, wearing American decorations much after, especially Korean War and on, as the, Iron Curtain descended.
Iron Curtain descended, yes.
And of course, it would be politically unthinkable, not just incorrect.
Right.
So all those documents ended up in the hands of the state. I don't know, medals in many cases were kept by original recipients, but documents they surrendered, I'm sure. So this is where those certificates came from. So you can find a certificate from World War II to a Soviet. They go for a lot of money, by the way. These days, they're much more scarce than they used to be 20, 30 years ago.
Okay.
But you at least find them occasionally. But this draft citation, first on my memory, first I've ever heard of.
One of a kind in
One
a
of
long
a kind,
time. Yeah.
just absolutely amazing,
Yeah.
amazing piece of military history.
Wow. And how much would those documents cost that you mentioned?
They go for around, I would say, 1,000 to 1,500 these days, depending on what medal specifically,
Okay.
what level. I've seen some Bronze Star citations and some Legion of Merit citations, but they're up there, they're really up there. I remember seeing them or selling them for maybe a couple of $100 or even less
Yeah.
back in the day.
The old days, yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
But this is the first thing that I wanted to show because it's just such a unique and unusual thing.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and came from a least likely source.
Yeah. To the casual observer, it just looks like
Yeah, it just looked like an
some,
old piece of paper.
Yeah, regular notes.
You would
Yeah.
throw it away without thinking.
Right. That's right. It was worth preserving for somebody. Okay, Igor. So I heard that you came across an oddity in the Order of the Red Star.
That's right. And I try to bring some of the seemingly common pieces here that have very uncommon research. Some numismatically interesting pieces as well, but that's a separate subject. But here, what we're dealing with is the most common type of post-war Red Star. This is, I shouldn't say dime a dozen, but you find them everywhere. Most of them are length of service or commemorative awards. They issued some for the 50th anniversary of the revolution, for example, in 1968, to many veterans or people who had any kind of distinction. And of course, up until 1958, many of those were issued for just length of service. So when you see a red star with a serial number around 2 million or above, chances are it's post-war, chances are it's length of service, chances are it's probably not even worth researching, quite frankly, because it's not going to be something interesting. But every once in a while you stumble on a really interesting piece, and especially when it concerns the ones that have very high serial numbers. So when you see something that's in 3.5 million range or higher, that's your signal that maybe you have to stop and maybe invest some time and money in it and try to actually find out who was the recipient, because here you may have some unexpected results.
Okay.
And this is exactly the case. This fellow got it in 1970s, in 1971, I'm sorry.
Wow.
And you see that the decree is 23 of February 1971,
Okay.
which is incidentally the Red Army Day, 23 February. That's supposedly when the Red Army came into being, fighting Germans, as a matter of fact, in the Russian Civil War, the beginning of the Russian Civil War. First organized as an actual army, stopping a German offensive near what was then Petrograd and later became Leningrad. But what's unusual, and again, the first reaction when I saw this, 23 February, well, it's some kind of anniversary award, it's no big deal, it's just in recognition of somebody's long service.
Yep.
Well, lo and behold, we have a commendation, and that gives you an entirely different story.
Wow.
And the story is really fascinating. Well, guess what? It's to a captain, senior pilot in 85th Separate Fighter Aviation Squadron, which was deployed, guess where? It doesn't say it so in the commendation, but this guy was flying combat missions in Egypt against Israelis in 1971, in so-called war of attrition before the Yom Kippur War.
Oh, wow.
There was a lot of action where Soviet aviators pretty openly flew their MiGs in missions against Israeli phantoms and so
Those
forth.
rascals,
Yeah.
right? First against Americans in the Korean
Oh,
War.
there was always war going
Yeah.
on. It was just a quiet war.
Yeah,
So
now it's
it was,
just and
Cold
now
War.
now against the Israelis.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, of course. No, they get their hands into every conflict or every
Yes.
area where they could destabilize situation.
Yes,
It's the
yes.
same operational model.
Wow.
And because Israel was client state of the United States, they considered it necessary to become patron of Egypt and everybody else who was willing to fight. So it was a proxy war, fought really between the United States and the rest of the West and the Soviet Union and Soviet camp.
This is super rare.
Very, very uncommon. It says that he flew combat missions, he's third-class pilot, which is, well, you could say, lowest qualification for a pilot, but sufficient to fly combat missions already as a fighter. And he was in Egypt from March 1970. They don't ever utter the words Egypt, even though this is top secret. It's marked here, even though this paper was never supposed to see the light of day.
Very cool.
To be taken outside military archives.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, they still keep it secret. Even in this paper, they don't say the word Egypt. They say special trip or special business trip. Kind of.
Okay, special operation.
Special assignment.
Special assignment.
What assignment will, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Or otherwise, you're not supposed to know. And he showed himself as a disciplined, well-educated, skillful officer who has initiative. He's resourceful. He flew 83 hours total in the air, conducting 7 combat missions to cover the troops, doesn't say whose troops, and various objects in the rear. And so forth and so on. So again, he of course never shot down any Israeli planes,
Okay.
but his mission was really to fly protection, to fly kind of aerial umbrella
Yeah.
for the Egyptians. and perhaps ward off some of Israeli planes. And for that, he is thereby recommended for Order of the Red Star. But we know because of the, first of all, unit, and secondly, the commander's name is right here. And it's interesting that it says commander who signed the commendation, chief military advisor, and commander of the Soviet troops in OAR, United Arab Emirates. So it's United Arab Emirates and Egypt versus Israel.
Wow.
Colonel General Okunev. And of course, Okunev, we could immediately go online, find out everything that we could about the commander. And it says, actually, there is sort of biography of his unit, and he's mentioned on a number of occasions, and says that in 1970-72, Colonel General Okunev served in Egypt, and there were 35,000 of Soviet servicemen that deployed there at that time.
That many.
You think about the size of Soviet involvement,
Yeah.
it's almost unfathomable. We already covered, remember we covered the Shanghai Defense
Yes.
Medal.
Yes.
And as you start unraveling this, you find out that there were not just hundreds of Soviet advisors, as they called them, but there were massive number of regular troops,
Wow.
entire units, air divisions and regiments, all at the same time. So it was a very, very massive Soviet war, make no mistake, against the United States.
Wow.
Global
interest,
there were
right?
just not a few advisors
and
pilots. No. Entire divisions, regiments.
Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating.
So this is your kind of Cold War oddity.
Yep.
And of course, it was very fortunate to find this out.
The humble star, right?
A humble Red Star
don't
that
know
you
what
you wouldn't give a second look.
Yep, that's right.
But there is more to this story.
Absolutely. So always look into things. And of course, the future episodes, you will get into how to research.
How to research this sort of things.
Yeah.
It's not
Soviet
always easy.
history,
It's not always easy.
citations.
Sometimes it's surprisingly easy. And
Yeah,
all
yeah.
it takes is, especially if you have a documented piece. Of course, document is a key, or at least finding the name,
Yes.
and then the rest of it is pretty straightforward.
Wow. So tell me, how did you come across this this interesting fact behind this medal? I assume you.
In this particular case, I already sort of knew.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
it came from a source that
The source already knew.
Yeah,
Okay.
the source already knew. It took some additional research.
Hmm.
So to be honest, it's not just luck of the draw.
No, it wasn't
It's
luck
not
of the draw, right,
I
right.
took it. But that being said, with this serial number in this range, 3.6 million, I would probably have researched it anyway.
Of
Simply
course.
because there you have a high probability of finding something interesting. It can be Afghanistan, among other things.
Yes.
It can be Syria. It can be Angola, if you're really lucky. And there were Soviet, hands in every kind of pie
All
all
kinds of
around the
conflicts,
world.
yes. Right, right.
They were
It'd
heavily
be-
engaged
yeah.
in many areas.
That's right. It would be safe to say that you try to research everything that passes through your hands.
No, that wouldn't be fair because
No?
in many cases I know the chances of actually scoring a good one are pretty low. Like when you have a Red Star
Okay.
in a 2.5 million range,
Okay.
chances are about zilch that it will be
Right.
something
It's like
fantastic.
the odds of a lottery, right?
Yeah,
Out
yeah,
of
but
millions,
it's
right,
too the odds are too low, and the expense is not cheap. I mean, it's not expensive, but it's not free. Let's put it this way.
Right, right, right.
So you have to shell out.
Yeah. But for the collector that comes
It does,
across
and
a
also
piece,
it's
yeah.
time. It's time.
It's time,
consuming.
right,
So
right.
you have to look through what you actually got.
You got to spend the time.
You
right.
have to spend time.
Right.
So I don't recommend researching every single piece. Now, if it's already in your collection, on the other hand, if
Yeah,
it's
why not?
For me as a dealer, it's a somewhat different perspective. But if it's already in your collection, well, what the heck?
That's
you may
right.
as well
That's
put
right.
a few more dollars into it. And
Yeah. Nothing to
hope
lose.
for the best, you're not going to lose.
Yeah.
Not much anyway,
Yeah.
or nothing at all. Any researched piece is worth more than unresearched.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. If you find out you got a gold nugget, then yeah.
Yeah, then
More the merrier. Yeah.
fantastic. Good for you.
Excellent.
All right, so let's go to the next one.
Very good. All right. Let's see what's next. Oh, Igor, you've been having a run of good luck on these on these stars. What is the next star?
This
that we
is a
have?
really nice one, and this
Yes.
one is really lucky because this was researched just out of the box, and of course the number was low enough. And you will notice that this is not just an ordinary World War II red star; it's something more interesting than that. It has the screw post base. The screw post base type is the earlier type.
Okay.
It has appropriately low serial number. It's in the low 6 digits. So yeah, this one had a good chance of being for something extraordinary. And of course, at that point in the war, when this could be issued, we are talking no later than 1943, they didn't award them for length of service. And it was much, much harder in general to get one of these, even for combat, than it became later in the war. So the requirements relaxed generally for all awards, including Red Star. So there's a big difference in type of commendation you will find on the earlier ones. So definitely all the earlier ones need to be researched. So we did just that, and lo and behold, look who got it. First of all, look at the number of awards he had.
Oh wow.
Quite an impressive list. And this fellow, you could immediately tell, received Medal for the Defense of Stalingrad, which means that he was in that battle directly, participating. And in fact, he was a regimental commissar, or at that point they already started calling them something else. The official position was deputy commander for political department, meaning political officer, chief political officer of the unit. Commissars were reduced in importance at that point because they realized right at about the time of the unfolding of the Battle of Stalingrad that it was actually a huge impediment that there were 2 commanders in every military unit. Up until that point, they wouldn't trust the military commander to just do his work. So every decision was taken jointly by Commissar and unit commander.
Oh wow.
So Commissar had the same weight almost as the actual military commander of the unit, which was a huge pain in the neck for the military.
Yeah, talk about micromanaging.
Yeah. So, and we know how successful, unsuccessful the first initial period of the war was for the Red Army. So they threw away all this nonsense and went to a single command. And this is what we see here. The rank, however, is still the old rank, regimental commissar, which is roughly equivalent of a colonel or lieutenant colonel for the regular military. It says here that during the entire operation conducted by the Stalingrad front to encircle the enemy troops starting from 19 November 1942 to 22nd of November 1942, and further battles and fights of the Corps, he exhibited excellent qualities as an organizer. And then it goes into this regular stuff about inspiring troops and political leadership and all that. But he was actually in the battle line. He was at the front, and he encouraged the troops. And of course, the real function of the commissar would be to whip up a pistol and threaten anybody who refused to go jump out of the trench and go forward. But be it as it may, he was in fact a senior political officer in one of the most important, crucial campaigns of the war. And if you look where Stalingrad front was and what its function was in the offensive actually was started by Southwestern Front, by the Northern Soviet pincer, and Stalingrad front followed within 1 day. So they started late because the conditions were so bad in their area. There was a blizzard that went on and on and on for an entire day, and it was only with 1 day's delay that they were able to jump out and start. But they did their part without a doubt. And 22nd of November, the significance of the date is when the pincers met near Kalach-on-Don and trapped the German Sixth Army in Stalingrad. So wonderful to find a commendation of this nature. It was signed by the commander of the Corps, And the corps was actually a tank corps. And there were regular infantry units within it as well. Used as tank support. Signed pretty early on 4th of December of 1942. So again, most of the Stalingrad commendations came after the battle, so we're talking February of 1942 or at the very end of it, maybe January when it was all pretty much settled. There was no escape. In December, it was still kind of unbalanced. Germans were hopeful with Manstein trying to provide relief for the encircled group of Germans, and there was a very serious offensive, tank offensive on the German side called Winterstorm, Wintergewitter, and it came very close to actually breaking through to Stalingrad. But this one is pretty early, as I said, just before the German counteroffensive. It was actually approved later on 21st of December when it was pretty much all over for the encircled German Sixth Army. 57th commander of the 57th Army signed it, and his chief political officer. So here we have it, an award which turned out to be Stalingrad.
Wow.
Nice piece.
Very nice.
You don't see this every day. There were quite a few awards given for Stalingrad, but not many of these people survived the war. And of course, they're very much sought after, these decorations for Stalingrad.
Yes, yes. Beautiful.
So here we have something interesting again that, of course, is more than just an ordinary piece. It's obvious that this is a screwback red banner. But this piece, it's amazing both in terms of numismatics, of variation, for variation collectors. It's pretty fascinating, but also it has a fantastic award commendation. And let me explain why. When you look at the back, you will immediately notice this, and it's a one-word mint mark. The typical mint marks that you are familiar with are two-word mint marks, and what they say in Russian means basically coin yard. Монетный двор, or mint, is the correct translation, but the early form of that mint mark was single-word abbreviation, which is Mondvor. And this is a Mondvor screwback red banner, which is quite uncommon because there were only a few thousand made this way. The earlier ones had country relief, they're so-called mirrorbacks, and those were issued in the beginning of the Patriotic War and all the way back during the Finnish War, Battle of Lake Khasan. Many of them were issued for extraordinary performance even in peace, in the time of peace. But there were quite a number of them issued compared to the single-word Mondvor red banners. Very, very interesting piece numismatically. You can see that the serial number is in 20,000 range, and all of them that you will ever find are in that serial number range. Only a few thousand ever made. So that being said, again, it's a nice piece, very sought after for a variation collector. It's in pretty decent condition. You see some enamel damage, but far less than what you typically encounter on screwback red banners, even the normal ones, the standard ones, two-word mint mark, that were issued from 1941 or 42 all the way through beginning of 44, actually, late 43. So it has no enamel repairs. Looks pretty nice for an early piece. But it's a really fascinating award commendation that's really the reason that I brought it up now. You can first of all see that the recipient was a sergeant major. It's uncommon for a non-officer, non-commissioned officer to receive this type of award. And he was commanding a company in the tank regiment, 80th Tank Regiment of 40th Tank Division. which was at the point when the war commendation was written a part of Soviet Southwestern Front. And we'll get to who commanded that front and what happened with that front a little bit later. But look at the commendation. It says, Comrade Alive, that was his name, while fighting the German invaders, showed exceptional valor, initiative, and resourcefulness. On 7th of July 1941, near Bronica, that's the name of a village, Comrade Alive took out 3 enemy submachine gunners that were taking position in a village house and were thwarting the movement of our unit. Now, 7th of July is when the Soviets were still trying to counterattack. There were famously counterattacks in Belarusia and Western Ukraine, where actually the greatest tank battle, one of the greatest tank battles of Second World War, and some say actually bigger battle overall than the Battle of Kursk took place
really?
in terms of number of tanks and armored vehicles engaged. It was completely unsuccessful, disastrous for the Soviet army, but nevertheless they tried to attack. As a matter of fact that Soviets tried to attack in the early days of the war, in the first couple of weeks of the war, is just another argument for the theory that Soviet Union never planned for the defensive war. The plan was from the beginning to attack, and all their military planning, strategic and tactical, was in terms of attack, in terms of offensive. Nobody ever thought of defending the motherland. The purpose of the Red Army was to go forward and to destroy the Nazi beast. Or the way they referred to it was fascist, of course, not Nazi.
Yes.
To destroy the fascists and liberate Europe. So the plans were to attack suddenly. It was just disastrous for the Red Army that Hitler kind of beat them to punch and attacked first. But he would have been attacked. And Soviet troops were pulled to the border in attacking positions. All the defensive installations were actually dismantled. The so-called Stalin line that existed on the border, on the old border of Poland before Soviets took over eastern part of Poland in 1939. That old fortification line was dismantled actually, and no new fortifications were built, seriously speaking. In fact, the troops were entirely exposed and ready in their jumping off positions. And that's what made Germans so successful. That's part of the reason the Germans were successful in the first weeks, because they literally caught the Soviet troops completely exposed or on the move. Some of them were still being pulled to the border. They were still in trains, still on the road, and completely not ready for defense. Their role was attacking. Their positions were attacking positions. So, and that's actually what they did, because that was the only plan that they had. So there was an attempt to attack Army Group South and Army Group Center at the very onset of the war. So he was obviously in that effort, part of that effort, because the way it's phrased even, that Soviets were on the offensive at that point. From 13 to 14 of July, and near such and such village, he was conducting reconnaissance. And again, he was a tanker, but his role through this entire period that commendation covers was reconnaissance. So the guy was a reconnaissance scout for a tank unit. While conducting reconnaissance, he had discovered important information about the enemy, got far into the enemy rear, and while being on that mission, tossed some hand grenades and destroyed, it says, up to a platoon of enemy infantry. Now, I personally find it very hard to believe.
Okay.
But he apparently did some damage, and he was apparently conducting reconnaissance in the enemy rear. Then on 17 July, he approached covertly an anti-tank gun of the enemy, and from a very short distance, tossed grenades, taking out its crew. On 18th of July, he did the same thing. So we are talking Soviet Rambo, if even a part of this commendation is true. Again, he's in the enemy rear, and There, he captured a medical orderly, or a medic, a German
Oh,
medic.
jeez. Okay.
Then on August 1st, he headed a sabotage group. And this is the kind of phrase you don't often see. The choice of words is very uncommon for a regular military operator. They would use it for maybe partisans later on and special NKVD sabotage groups, but to actually head a sabotage group for a regular army NCO is quite uncommon. In such and such area, he penetrated into the front line of enemy defense and tossed hand grenades, taking out up to a company now of Germans.
Wow. It just,
So it just stays get higher.
Yeah.
Then on the next night at Yemelyanovka, again another reconnaissance mission, he noticed that Germans started building fortifications and specifically a dugout. He brought it under machine gun fire and also tossed grenades, and thus persuaded the enemy to stop the fortification work in that sector, and many Germans were taken out of action. Well, we don't know, but apparently he was credited with that. He was also party organizer in his unit, and he made sure that because of his example, all the communists were just as excellent in every battle. So we can, of course, take it with a grain of salt. It almost sounds like political.
Maybe some hyperbole.
Hyperbole. But obviously he was a reconnaissance man. That's
Yeah.
no fantasy. And obviously he went on dangerous missions. And that's at the time when Soviet army was suffering colossal losses. Furthermore, when you look at the unit, you look at who signed the commendation, finally agreeing to award. Look at the names, especially the final decision of the people who were in charge and who could make this sort of decision when the actual decree was signed, and that took quite a while until 4th of January 1942. So we are talking from events described here, August, maybe September of 1941. By September, the Soviets were in headlong retreat, and it was really catastrophic at that point. But finally, the decree is issued on 4th of January 1942 it's a general order for the Southwestern Front troops. And just for some of our viewers who might have not heard the term, front in Soviet military usage means army group. So it's not a location necessarily, it's the army group under single command. And guess who were the commanders of that army group of Southwestern Front at that point? Timoshenko, because you heard the name, one of the Soviet marshals, one of the most prominent Soviet personalities in World War II. And member of military councils, it really means chief political officer. None other than Nikita Khrushchev. So they were the two who signed the final decree in December, that was based on December 41, but went into law as a decree on 4th of January.
Wow.
Now, Southwestern Front suffered one of the biggest, most painful disasters that Red Army ever suffered in the Second World War, was the catastrophe of Southwestern Front. So not many of the Southwestern Front troops actually survived. And to see one awarded to a soldier who was in such early action and hand-to-hand close action in the very beginning of the war, and he was on the Southwestern Front without a doubt, and then surviving it, that's highly unusual, because most of these people, we are talking hundreds of thousands that got into envelopment at Kiev, and that's where Southwestern Front, for all intensive purposes, was destroyed. Some units did survive, relatively intact even, but vast majority were caught in the pincers, and even the front commander, Kirpanos, was killed there. His entire staff was wiped out. Very few of the high officers from that area survived. So here we have it, a very interesting award for the first days of the war. in what looks like, at least in some of the sections, it looks like Soviets were still trying to get on the offensive.
Yeah.
And it's on top of all of that, it's a very interesting award numismatically. It's the Red Banner Mondvor, hard to find.
Now, how many documents have you come across in the past that were signed by Khrushchev?
Not many at
Not
all.
many,
his,
right?
his signatures, you find them occasionally, even original documents with
Yeah.
his signature. But it's not common. He was in charge of partisan movement later in the war, and for much of 42, 43, 44 even. He signed award commendations for partisan commanders, especially for high echelon commanders of larger units,
Yes,
formations for partisans. I've seen that.
Yes.
But generally not very common because he wasn't really military. So he didn't sign as many commendations as a typical army commander would sign.
That being said, it would add value to the group, wouldn't it?
It's just an interest. Now, it's a copy. It's not an original document.
Oh, yes,
you're
of
dealing with.
course.
Of course, if it were original document, let me tell you, I had this fantastic group not so long ago that had actual letters written by Khrushchev to a commander, to one of the most prominent Soviet commanders of partisans in World War II. And of course, that added quite a lot of value because this was in his actual handwriting. Those were original autographed documents.
Yeah.
Not just signed, but the entire thing was written. And also the subject matter was very interesting. He was expressing his gratitude for excellent service to this partisan leader, congratulating him. He was awarded this Order of Lenin on the occasion. And it's interesting that Khrushchev said that I express my full confidence that your next decoration would be the title of Hero of the Soviet Union and the Hero Star. It actually never happened. He never got the Hero Star.
Okay.
That person, but
He tried.
it was interesting that that Khrushchev wrote this in the letter that
Oh,
he would fully support that.
absolutely fascinating. All right. Thank you, Igor.
You bet.
Another colossal highlight. Nice pieces.